Nation. Big Blue Nation. Turn up the volume. Turn up the volume. You've arrived at the destination for all things Kentucky. This is the Bleed Blue Network Podcast.
What's going on, Big Blue Nation? We are so happy to be finally jumping on to the Bleed Blue Network podcast and sharing our experiences, our fandom, and our love for Kentucky sports with you guys. I'm Nate, and today I'm joined with Jacob and Kyle, both of the Bleed Blue Network, and we just wanted to do a short little intro podcast for you guys to start the channel off. If you've been following along, you know there's a lot more than us that are involved, but right now we're going to get the ball rolling and bring kind of everybody into the fold and start before the summer grind happens. And we have a lot of interviews, and these guys also kick off their own shows. So just to kind of jump in and get started, I'm going to go to Jacob first. And Jacob, this has been kind of a wild little ride with Bleed Blue Network and kind of getting to this point. Talk to me a little bit about like the last 3 weeks and how just kind of getting involved in this whole thing has been just like a crazy ride.
Yeah, it really has been kind of crazy. So I think where it really started was around the coaching search. Some of us were just kind of consistently in the same Twitter spaces and shared a lot of the same like opinions and feelings about that. And I think it was really when we thought that we were going to potentially land Scott Drew, where like we really started to kind of gain momentum and traction. People really wanted to tune in and see what we had to say, which was just a weird feeling of just like, oh, suddenly there's 500 people that care what I think about Scott Drew and his playing activity for the day. And then it just kind of like divulged from there and just became something entirely different. And then we started to sort of gather the people that it made sense to sort of build this thing with. And then, one thing led to another. And all of a sudden, we're talking to like Coach Evans and getting connected with like ESPN of Owensboro and, all starting to think about how we can add our own sort of different perspective through like our various shows. And I think we're all just really excited to get the ball rolling and really see what this can turn into in the future.
Yeah, it's crazy from like that perspective. I think at one point when we were doing a live or not a live, a space at 1 a.m. and we had 900 people listening during that process was absolutely insane. And it was also crazy that we ended up by sheer luck, right? Like having the right people on and just the right people coming on. And then, just by all of us knowing a few people here and there, we were able to break the story that Scott Drew was not coming to Kentucky hours before the mainstream media. Dave came on and said that, and it ended up being 100% spot on. And then tracking the planes was kind of interesting and being really the first to do that. And I know, Kyle, you've been in kind of both sides of the spectrum. You've been an athlete and now you're on the fan side. Talk a little bit about what do you think the players or recruits were thinking, seeing this kind of craziness from a fan base as this was going on, from someone who's been in that world?
Yeah, I think it's wild. You go from Coach Cal and, everybody thinks everything's solidified. And then, I'm sure Baylor students and student athletes were not understanding what was going on, thinking they're going to lose their coach. You had UConn just coming off of a national championship. Now they're thinking, what's going on? Are we going to lose our coach? And then I think the cool part is it opens up an opportunity that a lot of the guys now we have on our team didn't think they would have. Coach Pope coming in here and having to rebuild an entire squad, looking to fill 13 roster spots with scholarship players. And, I don't know that Jackson Robinson, if he comes, ever thought he had a chance to play at Kentucky. I don't know if Lamont Butler ever thought he'd have a chance to play at Kentucky. I'm sure they all believe they had the talent to do so. They just didn't have the opportunity, and now they do. And that's all you want as an athlete, right? Just one opportunity to get on the biggest stage and go ball out, and they're going to have that opportunity. And you know, Big Blue Nation is going to support them. And if they live up to expectations, this is going to be an exciting year for the fan base as we transition from the Cal era to the Pope era, which is how I got into your spaces. I am if you go back through, Cal apologist. I was wanting him to come back and give him another chance. Our best shot to a Final Four was going to be Cal coming back with these freshmen. And now you see what some new life into the program can bring, the opportunities it's bringing, and the new excitement. It's refreshing. And I am going back on my thoughts before of, hey, Cal was the guy, to now, like, we needed a change, and Mark Pope is the dude to kind of get us back to meeting those expectations that we have.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing from that perspective, because a lot of us we're like, Mark Pope, really? Who? And a lot of the fan base was like that. And I think it was to see the change, but also, when he got here and the new life and the enthusiasm and wanting to bring the fan base in really kind of changed everything. And, seeing that excitement that's now just around Kentucky in general, and just the opportunities that it's given, the fans to interact with, the coaching staffs and their engagement now on social media, right? It's just an amazing thing to see. The boom is now just been a thing. Everybody's looking for it. I think every recruiting cycle, that's going to be a really fun thing to kind of track. I don't know if we're done tracking planes. Who knows? I mean, there's definitely some fun there. I think that when recruiting season happens, is there to follow. And, this is going to morph. And we've talked about that, in our spaces. And this team is going to look different 3 years from now and how they recruit than they do now, because you're going to have freshmen and you're going to have those building blocks for the future. Kentucky can then focus on 2 or 3 of the best in the transfer portal and go out and just go get those guys, which, I think is a little bit different than what you saw now. And there might have been some players that would have been Kentucky players or on Kentucky's radar had it not been for the coaching change in the roster. But I really like where this is shaping up. And Jacob, I know that you're really big into, following through with the message boards and recruiting. What do you think that this does from the fan engagement perspective on that now, where, before it was just all looking at, high school recruits and blue chippers, or burger boys, as some like to call it. What do you think now that looks like from following recruiting at a Kentucky basketball level? Do you think it's more engaging for the fan because now you don't really know who we're going to go after per se? Or do you think it's going to make it, a little bit easier to follow?
Yeah, I think really it's gonna be more of that first side. Is like, we're really not gonna really know what he's going for. I think initially, at least like for the first probably few years of this, as we start to kind of figure out and get more of an understanding of how he approaches the game, how he approaches specific player development, how he approaches role players, right? Like there's a lot of things to be figured out. And I think, even though like he really is building this, like, on paper could be very massively successful team and have all these right components, right? Like there is still an element of, you have to make sure that those things are all going to eventually gel together, and, time will tell about that. But I think what I find so fascinating about his approach to recruiting so far since being here is he has completely flipped it upside down, not only in the terms of like the players, but also the coaches too, right? Like he knew his weaknesses were his ability to recruit. And so he went out and got probably the best 1-2 recruiting combo punch in Alvin Brooks III, and Jason Hart, for the Southeast region for recruiting in Texas, like in the country. They are very much the equivalent of the 2 guys you kind of can't think of right now, Williams and someone that are like sort of the Northeast equivalent of that, right? And then when you think about it from the player side, Mark Pope has always been about like his, really strong like offense, like really going for like 3-point offense. The first player he recruits on our roster is Amari Williams, a 2-time defensive player of the year. So like, again, he knew his weaknesses were in the past of this team's is their defensive ability. And so right from the get-go, he completely approached, recruiting for, again, a weakness of his being the first priority in the players that he was targeting. And then, as you noticed, the people that kind of followed after Amari Williams were all very strong defensive players that he was really trying to solidify. And now that he has that sort of that really strong, like foundational, like front court for the most part with maybe one missing piece, now he's really targeting that like back court that's going to be really explosive offensively. And so I think that I think like, I guess thinking forward is like whatever the what I would anticipate is whatever the shortcomings or pitfalls that we have on this team this year, I think the next year that'll be the first things that he'll be attacking and going after in a similar vein of like, going for the defensive players like he did this time around. So I think that will be a predictable piece. But I think from there on out, it'll be really dependent. But yeah, it's been really cool to be able to see all of these different voices in the industry and to kind of like sort of parse this out and kind of like a puzzle and try to like put things together and try to like draw conclusions from that. But also think too, the other, unpredictable piece is like the impact that NIL is going to continue to have on the sport as well. I think that could be really unpredictable. And so that could completely change recruiting. Who knows?
Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah. And I think we talked about when he first came in, hey, trying to find players for Pope's system. And we knew what that looked like on the court, but we didn't know the kind of like mentality he was looking for. And you talked about going after defensive players, and it wasn't until we were fortunate enough to have one of his former players from Utah Valley State on our spaces, and he really dug into like the kind of players that he is looking for. And obviously, Coach Pope has evolved as he's gone through and coached at BYU, and he's going to have to evolve as he coaches in the SEC. But then it started to make sense, right? Like the kind of players he was going after at first to really bring in some dudes who could be aggressive and play in SEC style ball, but have the experience. And then he started doing the Pope system, Bereas, Cars type guys that come in. You're like, okay, now we're really seeing like a well-rounded roster. And I think it may be predictable, but like we've talked about, the rosters are gonna be different, and we're not gonna know the players that are gonna thrive or potentially be like the next Reed Shepherd and come out of nowhere be a top 5 pick. So he's gonna have to adjust that way. But we do know that we're gonna have some not homegrown talent it's gonna be on the back end of the bench who's going to develop. But some of these portal guys that he's shown are some of them are underclassmen that could be in the system for a while too. So he'll have to adapt who he recruits. But we're also always going to have like I feel like we're going to have a core roster to build off of, which is going to be nice because we haven't had that before. It's always starting from scratch. And the people who did stick around were, I don't want to say bust because that's, it just took more time to develop, right? They took more time to develop. They weren't the 5-star we expected them to be.
Yeah, getting the team now and the roster dynamic and having someone who will probably bring players that will develop is definitely where the landscape of college basketball is changing. It's where, that little mindset in Kentucky fans will have to change. I think a lot of people are doing that already, but it's the understanding that, you're not going to get someone like necessarily a Reed Shepherd or a Dillingham that's going to come in and do what they did. Now, Kentucky will probably get some good one and dones over the course of time. And you need, if you can go get the number one player out there, you go get the number one player because he just adds to that roster and what that value is. But switching gears just a little bit, because we're we're definitely going to talk more about, basketball as the roster fully comes into shape and kind of do a whole deep dive into that. But, there's a lot of other aspects to Kentucky that we want to cover here, at the Bleed Blue Network. And right now, baseball is having an incredible season, potentially projected to be the number one seed. Jacob, for someone like you're a big basketball fan, but a big Kentucky fan overall. Did you ever think we would be talking about Kentucky baseball as potentially the number one overall seed in the baseball tournament?
No, not at all. I think I truly believed that we would be just that one unlucky, ugly stepsister that just never made it to the promised land of the College World Series. As we all know, every other team in the SEC, whether while they've been in the SEC or before, I think with Mizzou, I think it was before they were in the SEC, have all been there except for Kentucky. And I'm so excited that this might finally be the year where Kentucky can go to the College World Series. I'm based in St. Louis, and so I've already talked to a few of my friends, and if they go to Omaha, I am going to Omaha. But yeah, this team.
You heard it
really
here,
fun
folks.
To watch.
Bleed Blue Network will have a presence in Omaha if we get there.
Exactly. Yeah, they've been really, really fun to watch. But they still make me absolutely want to bash my head into a wall by some of just the kind of stupid mistakes they make. It honestly gives me a lot of feeling of this year with our basketball team is this unreal talent, and when it all clicks together, it's really beautiful. I mean, when you think about our absolute dogging on Alabama, for example, is a good example of that, of when the team really clicked. And so there's been some really awesome sweeps that I've been kind of following with the team, but then today they were so stupid against Florida, and could have really swept another series if they hadn't played the way they did. But hopefully they can finish it out tomorrow. And yeah,
getting there. And Kyle, I know you've been a football guy your whole life, and kind of switching gears just a little bit, because we're not going to do a whole deep dive into everything, but football, bringing in some really good guys, really good recruits in the transfer portal. The defense looks absolutely nasty. From someone who's played the sport, but obviously from the outside looking in, when you're looking at this Kentucky football roster and this team, how excited does that get you, and how far do you think this team could actually go?
Yeah, the football team being the way it has been in the Stoops era has been exciting. I just remember watching every Florida game, and a little bit of my background. My mom's side of the family, all Florida State. Then you got the Kentucky rivalry. I hate Florida with a passion, and every year watching Kentucky football lose to Florida was just painful. And then we finally broke through, and haven't looked back since. I'm excited for Brock and this wide receiver core to click. I think Barryon Brown, Dane Key, these dudes are legit studs. They are Sunday wide receivers if they can just get it to click. I think the new wide receiver coach coming in is gonna do good things for them. I think some of it was confidence based, being a wideout myself. You start seeing some of the body catches and whatnot. It's just once they get that confidence in and bring some balls in and use that speed and the explosiveness that they have, the offense is going to be phenomenal. And like you already mentioned, the defense, we're not going to have to, try to win too many 14, 17-point games. I think we're going to be able to put points on the board, and the defense is going to be able to close out games for us.
Yeah, the one interesting thing about the football team, in the Stoops era is neither team has, or not neither team, none of the teams have been able to really put both sides of the ball together fully, right? We had issues, one or the other. And I think what's really exciting about this year specifically is you've got a defense that could be top 10 in the nation. A lot of dominant pieces there. But if this offense, like you said, could really take that next step, you really don't know. We're getting into some uncharted territory. Obviously, when we won 10 games with Levis, the defense was good, but it wasn't great. The offense was good, but there was also deficiencies in that offense, even though we could put up and score points. But it's really exciting from that perspective. And then just to kind of close out, our just, intro to the Bleed Blue Network, Jacob, just talk to us a little bit about what you're excited about seeing over the next kind of couple months, in the channel and being able to cover Kentucky sports.
Yeah. I think, Casey and I really plan to, I think, take a more, I guess, quote unquote, nerdy look at things. Casey and I are super into the stats and analytics and even the advanced analytics around. And so I think we're excited to dive into, highlighting each player and kind of understanding how they're all going to kind of collectively come together in theory if it all clicks. But I think also too, looking at some of our upcoming opponents and what their rosters look like and, do some analysis around how do those matchups look and how do we feel that they might fare, and then, be able to reevaluate that later on during the regular season whenever we're actually able to have those matchups. One of the things I'm really excited to do initially is I think the first one will probably be Duke, to really see how we're going to match up in the Champions Classic, and to really dive into that. And I don't know, I've done a little bit of it just because I've been kind of curious of what we have so far. And if it all clicks and it all comes together the way it's supposed to, I really think that we could give that Duke team a run for their money. And some people might say that that's a hot take now, but we'll see later. I was also, fun fact, in my friend group, was the only person that literally said after Cal lost that game against Oakland, I said, I think that's the last time Cal plays for the university or coaches for the University of Kentucky on a basketball court. And part of me thought that might be he gets fired. Part of that, part of me thought that he could just leave or retire early or whatever. But I don't know. Sometimes my hottest takes end up being correct.
Ended up being right on that one. Kyle, what about you?
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into football as we start off with it. Me and you've had conversation on the spaces. This is a quarterback-driven league, and with Brock coming in, I'm excited to see him, in the blue and white, and going up against that first massive test at home when Georgia comes in, and with me and KY Sass and the All UK Ball podcast. Just really getting into the X's and O's of the game and looking at different position groups for football, making a baseball run and educating myself on that sport and using your expertise there to talk about, how they can go and make a deep run in the World Series there. And then as we get into basketball, looking at the different position groups, and I want to learn, from, a firsthand perspective on how Pope is going to use these guys and how he's going to get them to click. And I look forward to, maybe seeing them, if they decide to play over in the summer, some of these early tournaments and in the early non-conference schedule, dive into that. So by the time we get an SEC play and that podcast is really up and running, we can actually have some good analysis on how we think he's going to attack the opposing team. And I think the biggest thing I'm excited for with just the Bleed Blue Network piece is that pregame show and the halftime show, getting the Big Blue Nation's thoughts on how they think the game's going to go. And then at halftime, actually seeing, how it played out and what kind of adjustments we need. And we know we are a rabid fan base. So if it's not going well, it's going to get real loud, and I'm excited.
It's going to be rough.
Oh yeah, it's going to be real rough. But hopefully we won't have to worry about any of that. It's always going to be good. We'll have a halftime lead no matter what sport we play. And it's going to be an exciting year for UK athletics. My hot take, I think we got a legit shot at being the top athletic program in the country with the way some of these things are pulling together with baseball, tennis teams rocking, gymnastics. We got a women's basketball team that's going to be killer this year. So we have a way to put together, and Kentucky could be, the program for the country. So it's exciting to be starting this up now.
Yeah, don't forget our rifle team, Kyle.
Yeah, well, that team that's just an automatic national title for them. I'm really excited about this whole thing too. Just kind of I think the fun part about it is the randomness of how it happened. It feels a lot longer than, what are we at, 4 weeks now or something like that? Maybe it's a little bit longer. It feels like we've been doing these things for years at this point. And, that's why who's a part of this group is there, because it's that natural flow of conversation that we would have within spaces, and just, knowing that there's something there. And that love of Kentucky was just kind of evident in everybody. And, I thought it was funny that even before we kind of came public and said, hey, we should do this, there was people, in all of our DMs, hey, you guys should start a podcast, you should do, something. And here we are. And, through connections that we have and, just some sheer luck, to be honest, that for people that have followed us in the spaces and just what we've been doing, we have this opportunity afforded to us, and I'm really excited to see where that takes us. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this kind of brief little introduction to the Bleed Blue Network. Make sure you're following us on Instagram. It's at Bleed B Network. You can follow these guys as well. Bleed Blue Jacob and All UK Ball for Kyle on Twitter as well. You can follow me, Bleed Blue Nate. And we can't wait to share a lot of our shows with you guys. Leave a comment, make sure that you share, and also, give us a rating so it's easier for others to follow. And we really appreciate everything that you guys do. And just always remember, this is by fans for fans. And as always, go Big Blue.
Hey, BBN. Thanks for listening. Make sure to like and subscribe. And while you're at it, give us a review to make it easier for others to find the show. Thanks for listening, and go Cats.